Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 27th of May, 2024, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today, we have Mark Anderson from the United States and Diane Rasmussen-McCaddy from Scotland. And we will be talking, Marianna Spring a little bit later. But first of all, we're going to get kicked off because today is the first day of the World Health Assembly. We've been waiting for this for quite a long time. And, Tedros decided that the best thing that he could do to kick it off was to start patting himself and some others on the back. Let's just have a quick look at this.
Professor Katalin Kariko and Professor Drew Weissman for their groundbreaking scientific work that led to the development of effective mRNA vaccine against COVID-19, research that led to them being awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine last year in 2023. Professor Weissman was not able to join us today, so Professor Kariko will be accepting the awards on behalf of both of them. The vaccines that Professor Weissman and Professor Kariko developed have saved millions of lives and prevented millions of cases of severe COVID-19. Their innovative joint work has played a critical role in significantly reducing the burden of mortality and the burden of disease of COVID-19. Their leadership in this field has the potential to play a critical role in major health breakthroughs in the future. This achievement result from decades of hard work, perseverance, unwavering dedication, and collaborative spirit long before this work was appreciated by the broad public and even the scientific community.
So that's the tone for the day and no doubt for the entire event. But Mark, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that little clip first, but take us through your thoughts on the event.
Well, yeah, that's typical of Tedros to sound the trumpets and to talk as if vaccines cannot fail, as if they are practically a perfect miracle instrument in fighting disease. And that's always the underlying theme. Anyway, on the 24th of May, as this slide shows, the WHO member states, this of course is their own website, they agreed to share outcomes of the historic international health regs and the pandemic agreement. As that processes, the outcomes and processes to the World Health Assembly that starts today. And that photo showed a couple members of the Bureau of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body, including Precious Matsoso, an African woman. And that bureau sometimes calls it a treaty, but then now they've gotten away from calling it a treaty, even though they were for a while, which is important too. But anyway, this is a little bit from that May 24 press release as this all heats up. WHO member states have ended intensive negotiations aimed at strengthening global capacities to respond to future pandemics and outbreaks in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic and agreed to submit outcomes of their work for consideration by the upcoming World Health Assembly starting Monday, which is today. 2 parallel negotiation processes were undertaken to make a series of amendments to the international health regs and to develop a first ever pandemic agreement, convention, or other legal instrument. They're kind of monkeying with the language again. It's a treaty. Delegations to the 77th WHA running today through June 1st will consider the outcomes of both processes, that's the regulation and the treaty, and the next steps, etc. So that lays the groundwork for exactly what they're doing, Mike. Here we have Tedros. These are some key quotes from that press release. Over the past 2 years, WHO member states have dedicated enormous effort to rise to this challenge posed by COVID-19 and responds to the losses it caused, including at least 7 million lives lost, no mention of what the vaccines themselves might have done in injuries or deaths. And the other parts of his quotes, COVID-19 affected everybody, and that's why member states started a process to develop a pandemic agreement to make the world better prepared for the next pandemic. Right now, the main candidate is avian flu. while great progress was made during these negotiations, ellipsis dots, there are challenges still to overcome. We need to use the WHO to re-energize us and finish the job at hand to present the world with a generational pandemic agreement, as Tedros concluded. And this includes what I mentioned recently, Mike, the great catch-up to get a lot of kids, millions of kids, they've been saying, vaccinated that weren't vaccinated the first time during the initial pandemic. So they want to perform the great catch-up as well. And we'll move on from there. I believe we have a video clip of Tedros at a subsequent press conference right after that press release.
Next week, leaders from around the world will participate in the World Health Assembly. This year could be one of the most significant in our 76-year history, as 2 years of government-led negotiations to strengthen the global pandemic and response apparatus are high on the agenda. And there is progress. Member states have in principle agreed to a package of amendments to strengthen the international health regulations. These amendments set out to improve how countries prepare for, detect and respond to public health emergencies of international concern, and will be part of a package put forward at the Assembly. This process has been running in parallel to negotiations around a complementary international agreement on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. The international health regulations focus on raising countries' capacities to detect and respond to public health events that are an international risk. The pandemic agreement focuses on strengthening coordination for an international response to pandemics with equitable access to personal protective equipment, vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics at the core. Along with strengthened international health regulations, the pandemic agreement remains our best shot and indeed our generational opportunity at making sure next time a virus hits, we have a plan to get critical health tools to people quickly, effectively, and fairly.
That's more of the basic groundwork that Tedros is laying. And we might as well hit the next video, Mike, because now he talks about some new program. So they're always rolling out a follow-up, and then they've got something new in store, which is pretty common these days. So let's listen to the next one.
Also at the Assembly, WHO will be launching a new global health strategy, developed in partnership with 194 member states and partners, which sets a course for getting the world back on track to hit the health-related sustainable development goals. Crucial decisions are expected on a range of health priorities such as climate and health, WHO's work in health emergencies, access to transformative tools, communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases, mental health, women's health, and the reform of WHO itself. On 26 May, WHO will be launching our first investment round, a new mechanism for WHO, which the Executive Board approved in January. The investment round is designed to ensure that voluntary contributions, which are currently the majority of our funding, will be more predictable, flexible, and sustainable. Our new investment case outlines why and how supporting WHO is essential for progress in global health and saving millions of lives. It will be launched on 28 May during the Assembly.
So you see, there's a lot in store, Mike, and I think mainly what he's referring to there to target the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN 2030 is that great catch-up to get people, especially kids, that weren't vaccinated sufficiently according to the WHO's criteria, to get them vaccinated this time around in case the feared H5N1 avian flu just is overwhelming the world. Maybe you have some comments, Mike, in the last couple of minutes of what we're doing here.
Well, I mean, my comment about that second video in particular is he's talking about funding and investment rounds. So suddenly the World Health Organization is turning into what? Some kind of incubator for big business, some kind of, obviously we understand that the investment, the private investment that goes into the World Health Organization at the moment is done on a project by project basis. So somebody like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation will come along and say, well, here's a tranche of money for a particular project, and that money can only be used for that project. And effectively, it's the private funders that are driving the WHO's agenda. They seem to be taking that to a new level as part of this World Health Assembly. I'm staggered by how much they don't want to use the word treaty. But my question to you, Mark, is because obviously we are now in the process of a general election, so our MPs won't be discussing any of this because they're not in a job at the moment. Is there any engagement politically in the United States on this issue, or are you already too far into the election cycle for November?
The election cycle affects it somewhat. You're seeing most of the discussion at the attorney general level, at the state rep level. A few federal reps and senators like Ron Johnson of Wisconsin have discussed it off and on over the months. Ron Johnson is supposed to have a bill, S-444, that would get the Senate really engaged in this. And the Killarney declaration that we'll talk about a little later makes an oblique reference to that. But on a report card, the U.S. would be getting a C+ at best, Mike, in getting this discussed more broadly. There's rumbles here and there, but nothing really loud and sustained and coherent, unfortunately, that I'm aware of. Hopefully that'll change real quick.
Well, if you're getting a C+, you're doing better than the UK. But okay. In the meantime, though, of course, the war agenda moves on. And national service has raised its ugly head. Let's have a look at, the motivated, energetic, exciting Rishi Sunak launching this.
We have so much to be proud of in Britain, but one of the problems in our society is that we have generations of young people who don't have the opportunities they deserve. Britain today faces a future that is more dangerous and more divided. There's no doubt our democratic values are under threat. That is why we will introduce a bold new model of national service for 18-year-olds, to be spent either in a competitive full-time military commission over 12 months, or with 1 weekend per month volunteering in roles within the community, like delivering prescriptions and food to infirm people, or in search and rescue. Young people will gain valuable skills, make our country more secure, and build a stronger national culture. This ambition benefits our country and our young people alike. Just look at Sweden, where 80% of young people completing national service say they'd recommend it to their friends. Uncertain times call for a clear plan and bold action to chart a course to a secure future. Our plan will ensure new generations and our country meet the challenges of the uncertain world. Keir Starmer and Labour don't have a clear plan and won't take the bold action to navigate to a more secure future.
You love the little graphic at the end there. They've got a clear plan. Apparently, it's so clear, it's transparent, there's nothing in it. But anyway, that must have inspired everybody. I realize it's lunchtime and you're all trying to eat, so I do apologize for it. But let's bring up his tweets, because he also produced some tweets to tell us all about this. So he was introducing national service, and he was asking, are we wondering how it will improve ours or our children's future? Not really. Here are 5 things you need to know, he says. So let's have a look. Every 18-year-old will get the choice of how they do their national service, deciding to either serve their country in the armed forces or serve their community by volunteering. This bold new model will open up a world of opportunity. It will make sure young people in the UK get the same chance in life as their peers in allies like Sweden. Now, let's just remember that Sweden is a country where young people are already injecting themselves with microchips. So they're not sure that's the best model to be using here. Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and France, he said. Tories also mentioned Israel as a great example of national service as well. Some people may have a view about that. But anyway, he said, which all have recently introduced and announced new forms of national service. Everyone will get the life-changing chance to learn from the best of the best, from men and women of our armed forces, our inspirational NHS staff, or the fire service. gaining skills for life in everything from cyber to leadership. The COVID pandemic showed the value of civic service to individuals and our country as a whole. By building on this spirit of community, this bold action will enable young people to give back to the communities that raised them. And he finished off by saying this clear plan is costed in full through clamping down on tax avoidance and through funding previously used for the Shared Prosperity Fund, meaning that we will deliver national service without raising a single tax, and on top of our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence by 2030. Now, people that are in receipt of money from the Department of Work and Pensions are already discovering how the government is starting to crack down on what they consider to be wrongdoing and pulling money back from people that are full-time carers and so on. So this seems to be the mechanism that they are wanting to use to fund this thing. But the question of what would happen if somebody decided not to bother, that they didn't really want to get involved in going to the military or any other volunteering work, what would happen? Sky News asked Anne-Marie Trevelyan this morning.
If a young person, an 18-year-old, if this policy was to come into force, skips national service, what recourse will they face? Are they going to be arrested? Are they going to be imprisoned? Are they going to be fined? Are they going to have to do another year's worth of service? What's going to happen to them?
So, as the Prime Minister set out, there would be a Royal Commission to work out the details, but mandatory...
You don't have the details then?
No, and it's been clear that there wouldn't be a criminal sanction, but much like the fact that it's a requirement to stay in educational training until you're 18, that is the normal way of things. And this would therefore become, in a similar way, a mandatory activity. So employers would be clear that they would look to see what you had done. This would become part of the normal toolkit that young people would present as they move through their careers going forwards. And I think that's...
So, in other words, you're effectively being blackmailed into doing it, so there may not be any criminal sanction, at least not on day one. The Royal Commission will make the decisions on how this happens, and then they're intending to have this rolling out in a pilot scheme by the end of the year. So the question is, where's this all coming from? Well, we've got to go back to January, of course, and bring Admiral Sir Tony Ratigan on screen. And we remember that he was talking about conscription, but not in any traditional sense of the term. And indeed, this is not in a traditional sense of the term conscription. So this is clearly what they were talking about. And the key point here is this: who's driving this agenda? It's not the Tory party. It's coming from the defence community, the war community within the UK. And we shouldn't forget that Patrick Sanders, also, who's the Chief of the Defence Staff, also talking about this government will need to mobilise the nation in the event with a war with Russia. Now, of course, they're already talking about openly in the UK, politicians and also NATO, Jens Stoltenberg talking openly about the need to start taking the Ukraine war across the borders into Russia. This is getting extremely dangerous. And of course, the main problem for the UK, as with many in the West, is recruitment into the military. We've been talking about this over the last couple of years here in the UK Column News. And this was Forces.net from March, damning figures for UK military recruitment, with 54% giving up on the process last year. The UK handed the recruitment, outsourced that to Capita, who also gathers money for the BBC, of course, and they have failed miserably to recruit people into the military for a number of reasons, one of them being the fact that they're pursuing a woke agenda and attempting to bring diversity into the military. Another reason is, of course, people are recognising that the country is heading onto a war footing, and they are not really wanting to go and fight for this bunch of buffoons that we have running the country for the last lot of years, and nothing's going to change, as we're going to see in a minute. But of course, the other aspect of this was that if you don't want to join the military, I should say, by the way, that although this is going to be sort of a choice thing at the beginning, they're making it clear that there will be legislation following, which will make it mandatory. But the other aspect of this was volunteering. And so I'll just make the point that one of the topics that we've been covering on the UK column for many, many years now is the issue of volunteering and how that is bringing young people into the third sector, as Tony Blair called it. So this article is from 2016, Volunteers, Talent for the New Class. This is all about leadership training and bringing people into civil society and into government and so on to pursue the types of internationalist policies that Tedros represents. Well, let's just make the point here that people are already criticizing this and saying, well, don't worry because the Tories don't have a chance anyway. But this particular tweet saying, why is Conservative Central HQ sending out appalling media performers? That's not quite what it says, but I'll just clean it up a little bit there. Throwing everything at this election except anything good. Well, of course, the Tories don't have a chance, really. But the question is, are they going to, is Labour going to be any better? Peter Hitchens doesn't think so. He's saying the best thing to be doing at this point is voting against Starmer. I've no hopes for the Tories, he says, whom I despise, but a new Labour government will be far, far worse and permanent. So, of course, Starmer was making his campaign launch this morning. As Debbie said on Friday, the podium covered with the word change. But of course, it's no change, because although it's going to be a change from Tory policy, this is effectively going back to Labour policy of the Tony Blair age. And the voluntary aspect of this is absolutely going to be part of this. There is no solution to this problem within politics with any of these political parties. And so if we just put that graphic back on screen, again, I just want to remind everybody again of the hashtag. Since it is the 4th of July that we're having our general election on, let's start calling it Independence Day with a T and encouraging people to vote independent outside of political parties. I think that is probably the best option, at least as far as politics goes in this country. Diane, let me welcome you to the programme. And we're going to be talking Marianna Spring.
Yes, Mike, thanks very much. So for those of you who hopefully saw UK Column News last Wednesday, you will have seen that Mike launched for us UKC Verify. And the reason that we've done this is because, for those of you who are not familiar with BBC Verify, BBC has had a service that employs 60 journalists and has done for the last couple of years now, which they claim they were working to fight misinformation. So we know exactly what that means. Marianna Spring is at the head of BBC Verify, essentially. So we have to ask the question, where did Marianna spring from? So if you look at her LinkedIn profile, we see some interesting things. She's done some internships at The Guardian and so on. It is important to note potentially that she worked at the Moscow Times from 2015 to 2016, translating Russian articles into English. So that may be noteworthy. She studied a variety of languages, including Russian, at Pembroke College at Oxford. Going further back into her history, she was head girl in high school, so Suffolk High School. And when she was 14, she was the ball girl at Wimbledon. And you can see there that she was handing flowers to the Queen as the Queen arrived at Wimbledon that year. So that gives a little bit about where she comes from. We have a short clip here, I believe, that shows her talking about what she does now at the BBC.
And it's a very long title as well. It's Specialist Disinformation and Social Media Reporter. And essentially what that means is that I investigate usually the real world impact of online disinformation, conspiracies.
So she's written a book that has been published earlier this year called Among the Trolls, My Journey Through Conspiracy Land. And it's interesting to see the endorsement on the front cover when Ian Hislop said that it is full of unbelievable nonsense. I would like to remind the viewers that the definition of nonsense, according to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is words or language having no meaning or conveying no intelligible ideas. And that is what this book is comprised of. I read it twice the past few days so that the UK column viewers and presenters didn't have to. It is mostly anecdotes about people she met online, through Telegram, through various, lockdown protests that she went to in the last few years. So over the weekend, Debbie and I were quite busy on Twitter while the rest of our team was away at the Stand in the Light Festival. So we kind of started a bit of a Twitter storm, and Debbie had a poll asking if anyone would like to hear me, a professor of informatics and a qualified librarian and a researcher, interview Marianna Spring for some open evidence-based debate. And it looks like almost everyone said no, said yes. One person said no. That was probably Marianna herself. I tweeted out little bits of information from her book and so on throughout the weekend, including her saying, I realized how low conspiracy theorists and trolls had sunk, not just in the UK, but all over the world. And just as a reminder, Justin Trudeau, for example, said those who don't get jabbed are misogynist and racist, which I believe is really sinking to the bottom. So it's unfortunately, we reached out to Marianna. She didn't respond. We really hoped she would. I was really surprised that she hasn't blocked us just yet. But because she didn't accept my invitation to come today on the UK Column News for this evidence-based debate, we have a fake Marianna Spring with us today instead to be interviewed. I guess maybe the real Marianna, she's too shy. Maybe she just doesn't want to talk to us. Maybe we have too much facts on our show. I'm not sure. But instead, we have fake Marianna here.
Sorry, Dan. I just want to make it absolutely clear to everyone that the words that the fake Marianna are going to be speaking are Marianna's words from her book.
That's right. That's right. But we have the real Marianna, fake words from her book. We have the fake Marianna today standing in her place. And the fake Marianna is our best voiceover actress. Some of our regular viewers might recognize her voice. But welcome to the show, fake Marianna. How are you?
Oh, hold on. Let me just check my 24 fake social media profiles for notifications before we start.
Okay. I hope you're done with that. You have made up the name Conspiracy Land. Could you please tell our viewers what that means?
You can build a whole world where objective truth is irrelevant. That's how Conspiracy Land works.
Okay. What did you think you were going to do when you started to write this book?
Well, I'm going to track the lives of various online lies deployed by different activists and governments.
Marianna, in 2020, our Prime Minister told us we must stay at home whilst he had parties at number 10 Downing Street. That's what your BBC employer said, right? Do you trust what they have covered? When we were told to stay at home while Borst was out having parties, I have a friend whose house was constantly flooded with sewage water, including dirty used masks. Was it safe for her to stay at home?
Jason in Totnes had conspiracy theory videos, including jab justice, stop the jab, and climate fear, and saying no to the digital identification slavery. They tended to be underpinned by the idea that we're being constantly tracked and trapped in order to control us.
Marianna, we are being constantly tracked and trapped in order to control us. Do you remember the NHS Test and Trace app? Did you know that Australia has just passed the Digital ID Bill 2024? This has all happened and it's all fact.
Oh, the problem with truth, though, is that it's cold and categorical. To me, it seems very sinister when a young, female, investigative reporter working in a democracy is specifically targeted with hate and abuse at her place of work.
Wow. You know what? We actually found something that we agree on. To me, it has felt very sinister indeed when I, a middle-aged female professor working in a democracy, have been specifically targeted with hate and abuse at my place of work as well. Well, anyway, thanks for your time, fake Marianna, and maybe the real one will join us next time.
And thank you, you trolling, hateful conspiracy theorist.
Wow. Mike, what do you think of that?
Well, I'm glad you read the book so that I didn't have to, and I'm glad you read the book so that none of our viewers had to. I would absolutely discourage anyone from buying the book. Maybe you could get it from a library if you're really particularly interested. But of course, the idea of any critical comment equaling hate is designed to stop critical comments.
Absolutely. So with our new service, UKC Verify, we are offering a real fact-checking service Let us know what you need fact-checked. Anything from mainstream media that we can fact-check, we will do our best, and we will make sure that it is factual. So please pass on any questions that you have to us.
With the caveat, of course, we don't have. How many journalists did you say are in BBC Verify at this point?
They have 60.
Yeah, so we will not have quite the same resource. So we will have to choose our fact checking, but we will be doing this on a much more regular basis because it's time to hold mainstream media to account. So anyway, let's move on. Thank you, Diane, for that, and thank you to Fake Marianna as well. I think everybody knows who that was. If you like what the UK Column does, you'd like to support us. Support.ukcolumn.org is the place to go. A membership is £5 a month. We do need your support. It's only you guys that keep us going. We want to say a massive thank you to everyone who has joined and continues to support us in this way. It is amazing. If you could share our material as far and wide as you possibly can, that would be great, especially from ukcolumn.org and ukcolumnextracts.co.uk. And for anybody wondering why we're not on Facebook, is because we're locked out at the moment, and that seems to be a permanent thing. UK Column Extracts hasn't had much love over the weekend because Kenny has been up at the Stand in the Light Festival along with Brian and Claire and so on. So that's why he will be back on it tomorrow, of course. If you'd like to pick something up at the UK Column shop, please do. Plenty for you to get hold of there. A quick reminder of the event on Sunday, the 2nd of June 2024 in Jamaica Street in Glasgow. That's tickets available at Tickets Scotland. This is for the Scottish Vaccine Injury Group. Do get along to that if you possibly can. And the interview that was done with Ruth O'Rafferty is on the UK Column website. Ruth O'Rafferty from the Scottish Vaccine Injury Group is on the UK Column website. If you haven't seen that and you haven't shared it yet, please do. 1 p.m. tomorrow for the interview with Dinny Van Cleef from the Control Group. This is all about parallel societies and so on. Of course, under the government's definition of extremism, creating parallel institutions is considered an act of extremism. So please join us 1 p.m. tomorrow to hear about this particular act of extremism. And we also want to mention Hands Off Rafah event, emergency rally taking place opposite Downing Street tomorrow, 6 p.m. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. If you can possibly get along to that, please do. And let's just very briefly mention Rafah. And of course, what's been happening overnight is absolutely atrocious. Not that anybody should be surprised, bearing in mind what's been happening for the last 6 months. But it's really airstrikes on Rafah, killing at least 35 people, possibly as many as 50. This, of course, was a strike on what was effectively a refugee camp at the time. This was an area that the IDF had said was, effectively not, or at least was specifically designated as a humanitarian area, and they certainly had not told anyone to evacuate. So most of these people that were killed and injured by this were civilians, including one particularly harrowing image or video clip of a baby missing its head. It was, I'm sorry to have to tell you that, but it was absolutely horrendous, the scenes from this. Well, this is what Gilad Atzmon was putting out this morning on Twitter. I'll be happy to learn from AIPAC, Israel, and the IDF what is the exact international law that makes the burning of dozens of displaced refugees in their tents into a legal act. Mark, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this, but the situation continues to get worse. So it was probably inevitable that once the ICJ demanded that Israel stop their attack on Rafah, that in fact it was going to ramp up. But this continuous attack on civilians under the guise of dealing with Hamas can't continue.
Oh, absolutely. The one thing about Israel is we're told that nationalism, particularly hyper-nationalism, is bad. But when it comes to the Israeli state, the cruelest forms of nationalism are allowed to blossom. Other than that, we're told we have to be internationalists and we all have to get along, and isn't it wonderful on a global scale? And so Israel feels emboldened, especially through U.S. aid, to do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it, and to hell with anybody that would tell them different, especially the International Court of Justice. And so the huge irony here, the thing that we really got to contemplate is, any other time in history, the Israeli state would have been seen as a pariah, and the world would have been galvanized to go stop the Israeli state from doing this. But now they're doing it with impunity, and it's even celebrated in some circles. It's a huge irony and black eye on humanity's notion of morality and fair play.
And it's a huge black eye on the notion of the so-called international rules-based order, or at least it's a demonstration that what that term means is that we make up the rules, and the rules can change on a daily basis. There's no actual order in it. It's disorder, and it's quite incredible. Now, I mean, I've only touched the surface of this story, and Vanessa undoubtedly will cover it in much more detail on Wednesday, but it did feel that we couldn't do the news today without mentioning it. But now let's come back onto international events and so on, in the sense of international policy, at least. Well, what is the Killarney Declaration, Mark?
Well, in Killarney, Ireland, this activist named Eddie Hobbs, and thanks to Alex Thompson for tipping me off on this, Eddie Hobbs brought out a declaration, a long declaration, that's what it is, a long statement of observing what's going on with the World Pandemic Treaty and Ireland's involvement in that and other internationalist schemes. The declaration is calling out against those schemes. It's calling on the government of Ireland, including the ancient peoples of Ireland that predate the state itself. It's calling on, you might say, the soul of Ireland to really protest these things. And there was a big global economic summit. We can see that in the next slide, happening in Killarney right at the same time. And by all indications, Mike, Eddie Hobbs read this declaration at or near the site of the Global Economic Summit. We can talk a little bit about that just for context. Global cooperation, it says, has never been more important about the Global Economic Summit in connecting progress with purpose. Globalization, international conflict, the dawn of artificial intelligence, and the climate emergency are just some of the issues that will dominate policymaking and global boardroom conversations for years to come. This Global Economic Summit, which we're told is a relatively new event, is a not-for-profit thing, which will see international leaders and decision makers convene in the west of Ireland to develop fresh solutions to these global challenges. Fresh solutions, really. Transforming words into meaningful impact. It took place at the Europe Hotel in County Kerry. And I won't read all of this, next slide, except to say the middle part of it. This is really interesting. Keeping in mind the context where Eddie Hobbs read this declaration, the Global Economic Summit is established as an independent company limited by guarantee CLG and proudly functions as the philanthropic foundation for the Business Post Group. So they're hiding behind charity again, originating from a collaborative effort among journalists, business leaders, and political figures. The foundation emerged in response to evolving journalism models, and the need for impartial analysis that guides fact-based, objective decision-making, fusing the dynamism and rigor of a newsroom with Ireland's extraordinary convening power. The Global Economic Summit is uniquely positioned to unite global leaders in impactful dialogue. So journalism, Mike, is just embedding itself in the governmental process. It's not reporting on it apart from it. Rather, it's a part of it. And this is a common Bilderberg thing. The media is just completely dropping its function as a watchdog of the state, and instead it's collaborating with the state. Anyway, we have some of what Eddie Hobbs read from the Killarney Declaration, and he kind of captures the essence of it here at the beginning of it. So we'll go with this video.
The ancient Irish people who predate the state by centuries and who have long asserted our rights to freedom from tyranny, do so again. We declare the right of the Irish people to the unfettered control of Irish destinies to be sovereign and indefeasible. We, the Irish people, demand our legal endowment from the 1987 Supreme Court Crotty ruling to a national referendum on the continuing membership of the World Health Organization. We do so because the WHO intends to force a Trojan horse treaty upon us disguised as a new agreement and a complete overhaul of all regulations. We demand, in the first instance, that the Irish government rejects these manoeuvres as a breach of WHO membership rules and which require a 4-month window before any changes are adopted. But we see through and beyond the agency of the WHO to a multi-front agenda determined to create a bio-digital technocracy which threatens to subvert all liberal democracies. And so we reach out from here, at home and abroad, to all those now awakening to the real and present danger from it. Whispered through the sound of silence during the lockdowns is a stark warning about the banality of evil from Hannah Arendt, who studied the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem in the early 1960s, and who predicted that 21st century totalitarianism would be led not by the monsters of the last one, but by the banal bureaucrats of the next. So, we recognize and applaud the intervention of all US Republican senators to demand a Senate vote on the WHO plans to subvert US democracy, the rejection of it by large numbers of state attorney generals, and the determination of state legislatures led by Louisiana to reject the WHO, the UN, and the World Economic Forum. We recognize the intentions of the UK, Netherlands, and the Slovak Republic governments to reject the WHO, and we note that these events occur as the first major vaccine is pulled from human health due to the clotting of our human blood.
That gives the thrust of it. There are a couple more slides where I could read a little more of it, Mike. I don't know if you have any comments, but he is clearly laying the groundwork for this and showing that he believes there's something in the, the inside of the Irish people, something in their history, in their traditions that can rise up and fight against this, and calling attention to this. One of those banal bureaucrats, by the way, is Tedros, the Director General of the WHO, who in fact did attend this Global Economic Summit, the outside of which Eddie Hobbs read the entire declaration, which is actually quite long, I might add, Mike. I don't know if you have any other comments. I can share a couple other choice comments from that declaration, but either way you want to go.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, anyway, just to sort of put a capstone on what he was saying, it also says, we see you, the bureaucrats, in the Irish government's continued participation in a globalist enterprise for which it has no mandate from the Irish people, a people who fought long and hard to repel the grip of empire to which we have no intention of capitulating, no matter how it disguises itself, the WHO pandemic agreement, Agenda 2030 with its so-called Sustainable Development Goals, and the EU Migration Pact. We see you, the banal bureaucrats, in the moves to bring representative democracy, bring it to an end by replacing it with stakeholder capitalism. That's so true. This is a model of centralized, anti-democratic global governance advanced by the unelected World Economic Forum, which craves fusing state power, NGOs, and corporate power together, very accurate there, to the growing global power of unaccountable and unelected supranational institutions like the WHO and the UN. And we can move on from there.
Sorry, Mark, just before you do move on, I'll just say in that second paragraph there, talking about stakeholder capitalism, talking about the fusing of power, these are terms that we are seeing in the UK government. The UK government even has a doctrine which it calls the fusion doctrine, and which is all about creating these public-private partnerships, but also extending that to partnerships with NGOs and other so-called third sector organizations. So he's absolutely hit the nail on the head with this. This is exactly the type of thing that Marianna Spring would be calling conspiracy theory, but he's absolutely accurate with it.
And you're accurate, Mike, in showing that the government with this fusion doctrine is actually doing these things. The Marianna Springs of the world, they just call people wrong without looking as to whether the statements are actually accurate or not. We'll just look at this last slide because it's the most important of the remaining ones. And this is the actual website where the Killarney Declaration, when you go to it, there's a icon that's floating in the text field, and you click on that, and this is what comes up: sign the declaration digitally. And I believe you don't have to be Irish to do it. It looks like it's worldwide. So check it out if you want to get involved and sign it, and you can read more about it at that website as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. Diane, then back to you, and we're beginning with Debbie's blog.
Yes, thanks, Mike. So when Debbie was discussing her blog with me a few days ago, and we realized that we had some convergence in things that I've done in the past and what she was looking into, specifically around my previous research in health information and providing health information to people in ways that are the most effective. And so this particular section, if you go back and read her blog, you can link to the research that we've mentioned, both mine as well as the other one that I'm going to talk about today. So I'm not sure if anyone has ever heard of the company called Woodnewton. I had not heard of Woodnewton until last week when we were having this discussion. But what happened was Woodnewton got funding through NICE and the MHRA, some of our best friends, to do this research around digital mental health tools. So the money was from the Wellcome Trust, that was the funder, and they gave money to NICE and MHRA. And then the majority of the money went on to Woodnewton, the company, to do the actual research and do most of the reporting. So I had to look into who is Woodnewton. So it turns out that Woodnewton, working together with the MHRA, with NICE, with the Wellcome Trust funding, is another one of these public-private, and we'll call this one a philanthropic partnership. So what does Woodnewton do? Well, they have a creepy eye, first of all, on top of what they do. And they basically give some very vague language, in my opinion, about the type of research that they do, engaging people that work with different things in terms of finding innovative and cost-effective solutions. We have to be innovative these days. That's another buzzword. Our clients, as you can see here, some wonderful organizations, including the NHS, including the Ministry of Defense, including other third sector charity government organizations. So we can see here that they have incredible links with corporations as well as government, as well as what we would call third sector or charities. And we know a little bit about those. So what did they do with this? So they did this research, and there's a larger report. It's about a 60-page PDF report. We can provide a link to that in the show notes. But I'm going to take about this part of it because Debbie pointed out in particular that if we put together this agenda of wellness, as we would call it, and what does wellness mean? Wellness, to me, it seems like after being directly involved in wellness-related research, I used to be in a research group called the Digital Health and Wellness Group, so I have firsthand experience of how this all works. They get large amounts of money to do things that they could find out for much cheaper. And we're talking about millions of pounds for these projects, such as this one that Woodnewton has through the MHRA and NICE. So when we look in particular at young people and what they said about digital health, mental health technologies, and what this means is things like apps, or in the past it would have been websites, but now it's apps. So the idea is that anybody can go online and download an app, right? There might be some therapeutic benefit. There might be some sort of game element to it. There might be quizzes. There might be figuring out, are they depressed? How do they feel? So they were just sort of asking young people what they thought about these different types of technologies. And they felt like, well, it's easy to use. It's, safe. It's familiar, because we know young people spend a lot of time, generally speaking, on their phones. They don't have to talk to anyone. They don't have to disclose anything to anyone that they're not comfortable with. They can talk to maybe somebody they don't know. If there is, in some cases, some of these have chat features if they want to talk to someone who may or may not be qualified on the other end. Honestly, it might not solve anything. And also that we can't really diagnose things, but that doesn't seem to be the point with a lot of these apps. It's not meant to be a diagnosis. But at the same time, there are a few concerns about things that people might disclose that are dangerous. For example, they might give away too much personal information. They might share things where they're really into a serious situation with wanting to take their own life. And are these apps really going to do anything where they really need an actual intervention from a real qualified person to help them? So just to go back to some of my research, I have lots of research in this area. I've been doing this work since, I think my first published paper in this area was 2009, I believe. So these are just abstracts from two of the papers. And if you want to read the abstracts, I won't read this all out to you because that could get a bit boring, a bit academic. But just to say that I found a lot of the same things that I found that Woodnewton found. And I never had 1.8 million pounds to do it. We had a very low budget. Maybe we give away a few, incentives, a few vouchers to spend a little bit of money or something, maybe travel costs, but mostly we did these online over telephone calls and so on. And so we realized that generally speaking, they like them, but they also have limitations. They don't necessarily know that they're available. They don't necessarily know what to do with them, how to use them appropriately. And also, a particular interest to me was that they don't use the same terms that clinicians use. So that somebody might type into Google, if they don't have a diagnosis, I hate my life. I've seen that happen. I hate my life. That's not going to lead them to things that are clinical, assuming that any of these apps are clinical, because a lot of them are not designed with clinicians together. They're just people who thought they should make an app. App designers, developers who say, oh, let's do something for depression and we'll throw it together and we'll put it out on Google Play and see what happens. So they are a bit dangerous. I would say, though, as well, that another one of my papers around the issue of authority goes back to what I was talking about with Marianna Spring. And the idea of what is an authoritative piece of information. It might be more authoritative to talk to someone who feels the same way or has the same condition or health problem compared to an NHS doctor who you don't want to talk to at all. This was a keynote speech that I gave in 2018 to people in NHS Scotland around policy, practice, and research in mental health. So this summarizes not only my own sort of last 10 years of research going in and out of this topic, as well as what other people were finding at the time. So I find it very, very discouraging that this much money has been spent, Mike, on something that we already knew, and that if they had just given me a phone call, they could have found this out for free and not have to spend that much of the taxpayers' money.
Yeah, so I do wonder, Diane, why they felt the need to relaunch a new investigation instead of looking at what's already in the scientific literature.
Yeah, I mean, the other possibility is that they found my papers. They're all freely available, that maybe they found it, and then who knows what they actually did with the 1.8 million pounds. But from what I saw, if reading the report, the field work, which was the interviews and the focus groups they said they did, took place over 3 months. So I don't know how you spend 1.8 million pounds in 3 months. I really don't know how you do that on actual research costs. So I would like to know where that really went.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Mark, let's come back to the United States then. And what's this 10th Circuit Court been up to?
Well, this is actually good news, Mike. The 10th and 8th Circuit Courts in the U.S. are hitting back against vaccine mandates and related matters. How timely, right, with the WHO starting their WHA today. And another thing I'll preface with here, Mike, is that these are the kinds of actions where courts and state legislatures, even county governments, et cetera, make independent decisions medically in terms of informed consent, and they don't force people to take a vaccine. They don't force people to take a PCR test, things like that. These are the kinds of actions that many people fear the pandemic treaty, aka agreement, will mitigate against and put everything in a straitjacket and make local and judicial independent actions far more difficult. But anyway, the 10th Circuit in this matter weighed whether the University of Colorado Medical School's vaccine mandate burdened the exercise of religion. It's the case Doe versus Board of Regents at that university, dated May 7th, and so on and so forth. People can read more in the slides about that. We'll move on from there. This is also from the publication Colorado Politics that we started out with for this segment. In a fiery opinion, the federal appeals court based in Denver tore into a pair of COVID-19 vaccination policies that the University of Colorado imposed on its own medical staff in latter 2021. And the court concluded they discriminated against certain religions, and affected plaintiffs were consequently entitled to exemptions. In the 2-1 vote in the 10th Circuit, the all-Republican panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit directed unusually sharp barbs at each other and at the trial judge, who initially declined to block the university's mandates. Judge Allison EID, writing for the majority in the 2-1 decision, believed the policies governing religious exemptions at Colorado University Medical Campus were permeated with animus. In other words, there was, apparent animus or things like that. In this next slide, Colorado University, quote, has not even attempted to explain why its interest is served by granting exemptions to practitioners of some religions but not others. This is a dissenting opinion. No one contends that Christian scientists are any less likely to contract or spread COVID-19 than Buddhists, Roman Catholics, or the Orthodox Christians, wrote Judge Ide, an appointee of Donald Trump. But because plaintiffs were the wrong religions, their exemptions were denied. Actually, that was the main opinion against what the university did. It's a little hard to sort out here. The next paragraph, Senior Judge David Ebel, a Reagan appointee, not a Trump appointee like the first one, he agreed that the Anschutz campus of University Colorado Medical School, the initial policy requiring employees seeking religious exemptions to show their faiths opposed all immunizations, he agreed they were likely unconstitutional, but he disagreed that the revised policy was problematic, and he criticized the majority for accusing the university of discriminatory intent. So he didn't see it as discrimination, whereas the majority did. We're still unpacking this a little bit. Here's what Judge Ebel warned, disagreeing with the majority. I believe it is imprudent and beyond the current record for our court to make emphatic and unsupported findings of animus when it is quite possible that the university was just trying to draft a narrow policy addressing a very specific risk in order to keep its patients and staffs free from a preventable COVID risk at a time of great urgency and uncertainty when COVID was killing so many people receiving medical care. And we'll move on from there as we unpack this and wrap it up, Mike. Another twist in this is the 8th Circuit to the east of that took into account the Mayo Clinic, which is in Rochester, Minnesota, its main clinic anyway. And the 8th Circuit ruled that the Mayo Clinic must face religious bias claims over COVID-19 vaccine policy, the court ruled. And I think we have a little bit more about that. I certainly won't get into this whole thing. I'll just hit the main part of it. A U.S. appeals court on Friday received a lawsuit accusing the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota of illegally firing 5 employees who refused on religious grounds to receive the COVID vaccine or to be regularly tested for the virus. In this case, a unanimous 3-judge panel, the other one was 2-1, of the St. Louis-based 8th Circuit, a court of appeals, said the judge who tossed out the consolidated lawsuits last year wrongly ruled that the workers had not connected their objections to Mayo's COVID-19 policies with their sincere Christian religious beliefs. Basically, what it boils down to is in both cases, it came up that the people seeking religious exemptions had to actually point out specific passages in their religions where vaccines could be specifically said to be a bad idea. And this turned out to be an unnecessary burden that didn't have to be met. And so it's good news that rejecting the jab, Mike, on religious grounds was supported and ruled to be a favorable thing by both circuits. And it's a good trend to see, just as the WHA is being started there in Geneva, Switzerland. We can only hope that if they consummate a treaty, it will not mitigate against this kind of localized decision-making at the national and subnational level that would uphold medical choice and informed consent.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Mark. Right, we're just going to finish with a couple of very brief items here. First of all, the Daily Beast was pushing this out. 12 people were injured after turbulence struck a Qatar Airways flight from Doha to Dublin on Sunday, officials confirmed. This is all over the mainstream press. And again, they're taking something which is totally normal and making it appear to be abnormal. I'll just remind everybody what we showed on last Wednesday's programme. This is from the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board. It's a paper called Preventing Turbulence-Related Injuries in Air Carrier Operations Conducted under Title 14 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 121. And they absolutely demonstrate that if you look at the dark blue line there, there is zero trend from between 1989 and 2018 in the number of turbulence-related injuries. So any suggestion by the mainstream press that this is somehow related to climate, that there are more, that it's more common for people to be injured, is simply false. So let's call that a UKC Verify reminder. And we'll just end with this, because this went out on Twitter today from Dr. Simon Godek. The meme saying, a virus didn't cancel your medical treatment, destroy your business, erase your civil liberties. The government did. And again, we put hashtag Independence Day on this because it wasn't just the government. It was because the government of the day was absolutely supported by the opposition and by, all the opposition parties, in fact. So there was no opposition within politics to the lockdowns and so on. So if we're thinking that there are any solutions in the mainstream parties, I think we would be thinking incorrectly. Just keep that in mind and do push that hashtag. Let's get some momentum behind it. We'll leave it there for today. We'll be back in a few minutes if you're a UK Column member for some extra. Otherwise, don't forget the interview tomorrow, and we'll be back for the news on Wednesday at 1 p.m. as usual. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.